So David invited me to come and talk about inside the collector's mind what you, the photographer, needs to know. Is there anybody in this room that is not a photographer? Raise your hand. Okay, all right. Out of curiosity, is there anybody in this room that shows with a gallery? Wait, raise your hand, proudly. And how many of you would like to show with a gallery? Okay. So hopefully by the end of my 104 slides, you will get a sense of what we collectors think about, and a little bit about how you strategically think about getting out into the marketplace and what gallery might be right for you. Why are we here? And what's going on in the fine art photo market? Well, it's exploding, as everybody knows. And photography really has become a global player. And that means that there are more photo galleries, certainly since I began in 1985. There's more attention to photography exhibitions. The auctions, there are photo-only auctions now. The prices are through the roof. Anybody know what Gursky got? Was it last fall? $4.5 million at Sotheby's. And of course, because of all of this, there are more collectors. So I'm going to try to give you a little peek inside the collector's mind. So my job today is to give you the buyer's perspective. You are the maker, I am the buyer. It's like there's a Maginot line, a fence. And you're over here, and I'm over here. And the question is, you know, how do you, as you say in French, how do you do the pont, the bridge? I want you to understand where we go, what are our resources. And I thought at the end I might give you tips on how to get on a collector's radar screen. There's lots of seats. I'm going to turn this off for a sec, and I'm going to ask you to just scream out, what's your brand? What is it? What's your photography like? You know, just describe your style. Anybody?
Abstract.
Abstract.
Photographic anthropologist.
Oh my goodness. Abstract. Photographic anthropologist. Okay. Street.
Historical buildings.
Historical buildings.
Digital art.
Digital. Landscapes. Documentary.
Dreamlike landscapes.
Yeah, landscapes. Okay. Nobody portraits? Floral. Portraits.
Black and white wildlife, alternative process.
Oh, you only get one. Okay. Well, my point being, so I was having fun with this yesterday. My point being that if you describe your brand, your style, and I used all different fonts, which I was having fun with. So we got some of them: fine art, landscape, portraits, street documentary, social consciousness, fashion, travel, and many of the other things that you talked about just now. Well, there are galleries out there, just to get you thinking, that are more inclined to show a landscape, but they wouldn't necessarily show portraiture. So you begin to think strategically about where might you fit in for those of you who are looking for a gallery. And I just took 4 galleries, and I'm sure you know them all. So Documentary Street might be a Howard Greenberg gallery on 57th Street. But you probably wouldn't find emerging artists the way Brian Clamp at Clamp Art shows emerging artists. You probably wouldn't see those artists at the Howard Greenberg Gallery. Nor would you see street photography probably at Staley Wise, because they do mostly fashion. And Steve Kasher tries to have a social conscience behind a lot of the photographer's work that he shows. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying, I'm trying to get you thinking a little bit differently, that galleries have a brand, have a style. Galleries have a taste, just the way you have a style. And collectors do too. So we gravitate towards subjects, themes, styles. So, and this was just fun, you know. It could be animals, it could be cats, it could be babies, it could be flowers, cityscapes, landscapes, portraiture. But for example, I don't have one landscape in my apartment, and I have close to 200 photographs. So we collectors are no different than you in that we have style and taste and a certain brand that we follow. And I say this just to set this up, I want you to really understand how we think. So, and being strategic is a key buzzword. A little bit about my background. I have an undergraduate and a graduate degree in art history. My first experience, I was an intern at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and then I was asked to run the intern programs for a couple of years. I was also an intern at the International Center of Photography during its first year, which was 1975. I teach at SVA, it's really funny, and I teach to photographers there. And I started collecting in 1985, and I always ask them, how many of you were born by 1985? Anyhow, I segued over to Chase Bank, the original David Rockefeller non-merged Chase Manhattan Bank. And I ran all of the cultural affairs programs around the world for them. And it was a pretty great job, and I did this for 20 years. And I left in 1999, and for the last 10 years, I have been a sponsorship consultant. I work with nonprofits and artists occasionally on how you more successfully get money from the business world. Since I'm the insider, having given the money away, I now help museums and theaters and artists on being smarter in how you approach business for money. In terms of my photography, I called myself a photography enthusiast, but I sit on the collections committee at Harvard, and I've been doing that for a long time, I think 17 years. I sit on the acquisitions committee at the International Center of Photography. I am a board member of the newly formed Magnum Foundation, and I threw this in. I don't think American Photo does this anymore, but I don't even know if is American Photo still in existence? Yeah? Anyhow, there was a period of time where they would always identify the 100 most important people in photography. So I was number 68 out of 100, but that was in 1998. They haven't talked to me since. But Princess Diana was on the cover of that issue. I began to collect photography, as I said, in 1985. I have at least 150 images, very little in closets or in storage, very limited budget. Very, very limited budget, which I'm going to talk about. I had no assistants, and everything has personal resonance. This is my entrance hall, and I hate nails, except for things that are very big. So, well, I'm not even going to tell you what those are, because I'm going to get to that. So I have some themes, back to taste or a brand or style. And some of does anybody recognize any of the images here? I'm sorry? Not the Eiffel Tower, the photographer. Anybody recognize? It's Marc Ribot on the top, the painter of the Eiffel Tower, André Kertész on the lower left, and on the banks of the Marne by Cartier-Bresson. So France is of interest to me. Very interested in art history and artist portraits, and I think it's because I began in the museum world. And so again, we have Cartier-Bresson, the portrait of Matisse. Does anybody mind if I sit? No. Oh. Karsh is the portrait of Giacometti, Andy Warhol's first show. And anybody know this artist dressed up as one of the princesses in Las Meninas? Velázquez, huh?
Cindy Sherman.
No, it's not Cindy Sherman. It's Morimura. Anybody know Morimura? Yassimo Morimura? No. He dresses up oftentimes as women. He dresses up as Greta Garbo, and in some kind of either art historical or art icon sort of fashion. But I just want to say that I'm not a dealer. I don't represent anybody. I'm just a passionate collector. I'm not a professional. I'm not an expert. but it's really been fun over the last year and a half to give tips to others on collecting. So I just want to sort of preface this talk. So today what I want to focus on is what are the issues that collectors think about before they spend a penny? Where do we go to buy and to look? What are the questions that we ask? What are the buying tips that I can give you? But also, how do you get on the radar screen of a collector? So I'm going to start with the typical collector issues. This is it. They're scared to spend money. They always question if it's a fair price. And everybody wants confidence. That's what it's about. No matter what we collect. Your question was, what defines a collector? And maybe we can get into that more towards the end, but I'm hoping I can answer it. But what you collect and what I collect, it's going to be different because it's all about personal, what touches us personally. And I think that's the key. And it could be that it's baseball caps. It could be China. For me it happens to be photography. But I think Bill Hunt is speaking here on Thursday, and he always says that, not that this is the definition of a collector, but he says when the hair goes up on your arm, well, that doesn't happen for all of us, but or when you're walking away, but your feet are going back that way. So I thought what I would start with, though, is what are the questions that collectors ask before they spend a penny? So, and I think it's worth paying attention to this because I think that, we're spending money and you have to think through a lot of issues besides the image. So the first one is, do you want to collect or do you care whether you're collecting a live artist, a living artist, or a dead artist? Do you want to grow with the artist? I have friends who collect contemporary art, and I'm always quite jealous when I go to their dinner parties with all these artists because so many of my artists are dead. But I mean, it's really true that that collectors think about this. Do you want big names, well-known images? Are you doing this for investment, or is this for personal pleasure? And I'm not giving you right or wrong. I'm just saying these are the issues that collectors think about. Do you want to follow a movement? Do you want to follow a generation? A decade, a certain decade. Did anybody see, I forget the gallery, it wasn't Castelli, but there was a wonderful exhibition of art from the 60s, Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg, and it came from the Skull collection. Did anybody see that? But I mean, that was a decade. They only collected from the 60s. And I have a comment about women. The photographic world is in the fine art world, the photographic world is the most generous to women. There is I don't know if you'd call it a glass ceiling, a palette ceiling, for women in the painter world. Very interesting. What else? Okay, what does vintage mean? Somebody give me the definition of vintage. Here the issue is, do you want contemporary or vintage? What is vintage?
A meaningless term.
Okay, meaningless term. One sec.
Anything that's photographed, the old process of chemicals.
But Camera Club they have dark rooms right now. They have chemicals, and they could be done in 2012.
The early stages of shooting, or the start of.
No, wrong.
Printed by the photographer, pretty close to when he made the negative.
Bingo. Except it doesn't have to be printed by the photographer, but it has to be. They say that it's printed within 5 years of the taking of the image. That is the definition of vintage. So it's interesting because it's a word that everybody uses, and almost nobody understands the definition.
Say that again. Printed within 5 years.
5 years of the shooting, of the making of it. So. That's why, one of the things I have a lot of show and tell here, but one of the things I wanted to bring was Christie's and Sotheby's and Phillips all had auctions last month. So I was going to bring an auction catalog so you can see, you'll begin to see how things are written up, and hopefully after this talk, it may make more sense on how they define it. But they'll always say vintage, or they won't say anything, and it'll be done in 1951, and they don't say printed later. If it's printed later, it's not vintage. So, do you want black and white, or do you want color? And what's interesting is color, I think color is harder to hang. Not because of its physicality, but because color needs wall space to breathe. Whereas I feel that you can put multiple black and whites together and make a collage on a wall, and they don't, what's the word? You know, they don't argue with each other. The collection's future, where's it gonna go? You're gonna sell it? You're gonna leave it to the kids? You're gonna donate it? I'm gonna donate my collection to 2 institutions. But collectors have to think about that. We live in New York City, they have to think about wall space. You're gonna store it, you're gonna rotate it, you want it all out? Budget. Are you gonna have an annual budget? Are you gonna sell, there's some seats up here, are you gonna sell to replenish your budget? And I have the word threshold on the screen, and I use this all the time. And what I mean by a threshold is every single one of us in this room, and anybody I know that collects, has a threshold. That threshold is, at what point are you willing to put money in a piece of art where you may not get your money out? And over what point are you willing to buy, but you have to, you know that you can, it's an asset, you know you can get it out, your money out. Does that make sense? And everybody's threshold is very different. But I think everybody I know has a threshold. And I think that's an important point. Themes. So this seems to be across the board, just the way all of you in the beginning were talking about the fashion and the flowers and the cityscapes and the landscapes. A lot of collectors develop themes. So the ones that come to mind, Henry Buell and Hands, and he is actually about to sell his collection. Bill Hunt, who's going to speak on Thursday, has this huge collection where you just don't see directly the eyes on the individual. And he'll tell you more about that. He just had a book come out on his collection, so he's going to talk about that on Thursday. And then there's Joe Baio, who has almost 3,000 works in his collection, all children and adolescents. So, and then there's me. I love artist portraits. So when you saw that, when David showed the wall with the railings, those are all, I have about 30 artist portraits. I mentioned the Giacometti by Karsh. I have Martha Graham by Barbara Morgan. I have, remember Lucy Ricardo by Cindy Sherman. And I mentioned the Matisse by Cartier-Bresson. So before we really dig in, my last thoughts are, you really need to start, collectors need to start slowly. Take your time because your tastes are going to change. It's normal. And finally, you shouldn't knock your instinct. You got to go with your heart. You have to go where you feel something. And as Howard Greenberg once said to me, it's about the X factor. You know, you need to connect, you need to feel that you can't live without it. But there's an emotional connection you have. And I'm sure you've all had that emotional connection, even going to an exhibition and seeing something and you just completely relate to it. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about where collectors go shopping and what are the questions that they ask. And I'm going to pepper the questions into where they go shopping. Okay, so I'm going to start where we shop. And I'm dividing it like a supermarket into different aisles. So there's the for-profit aisle, and there's the not-for-profit aisle. The for-profit aisle are the galleries, the auction houses, and the art fairs. The not-for-profit aisle are the benefit auctions and the limited edition prints. Am I making sense for everybody? And what you're going to learn is that collectors really pay attention to not-for-profit benefit auctions and limited edition prints. That's a big tip. For probably 50% less than what the art goes for in the galleries and the auction houses and the art fairs. So the galleries, I don't need to tell this group that the galleries, there are photo-only galleries, there are mixed galleries, it's high-end to emerging, and then there's specialty galleries. So 19th century, Latin America. One of the things that's so interesting also about photography galleries, I don't know if any of you have paid attention to this, but let's call it the medium level gallery in Chelsea, the Julie Sauls, Yancey Richardson, Yossi Milo, Steve Kasher. When you go up the chain and you start hearing about Gagosian, right, and Matthew Marks, those are mixed galleries. And the sort of one step below are photo-only galleries. And there are many photographers who actually go to these higher end galleries. And I'll give you a perfect example, which is Alex Soth. How many of you have heard of Alex Soth? Or Sally Mann. And they're represented by those top end galleries, and they don't like being lost in the stable, you know? So they come back to a photography gallery. The best resource, and I brought the recent one, sorry, I can't hold. The best resource, everybody know about Photograph Magazine? Everybody? Anybody not know about it? Okay, well, it is the great Bible of photography in New York City. And I have it, I'll keep it up here. It has the galleries, every 2 months it comes out. It's has all the galleries and the shows. It has the auctions, it has benefit auctions. It's got articles, reviews, resources like framers, and not renovation, what do you call it when you have to fix up a photo? Restoration. I think it's $40 for the year. It's fabulous. And info@photomag.com. Bill Mindland is the publisher. It's fabulous, and everybody should be subscribing to it. The galleries that deal with emerging artists, you know, obviously the work is less expensive, but what's interesting, the dealers are often friendlier, and they spend more time with beginner collectors. You know, and I think we all want to help the field. I mean, when David invited me here, it's about helping we're all in the same field. And and I'm going to get to this later on, it's a small community. There are certain galleries that are more interested in emerging artists. Michael Foley, Sasha Wolf, Clamp Art, Dan Cooney are all down in Chelsea. Higher Pictures just moved up to Madison Avenue in the 70s. Clamp Ching is in Brooklyn, and Foucault is in the Bronx, and I believe it's a nonprofit as well. And then there's I'm going to get into the online marketplace, but the online marketplace is Jen Beckman and Exhibition A. Here's a tip from the artist's point of view, from the photographer's point of view. Some galleries do portfolio reviews. Many galleries don't. The worst thing you could do is show up with your portfolio. I think it's incredibly disrespectful. Now, I don't run a gallery, but I do run a business, and I expect people to make an appointment. So you may very well get your portfolio reviewed, but you go to the gallery, you say, would you mind, could I, you know, you make some kind of connection in advance, but you just don't walk in with a portfolio. That is the kiss of death. I wanted to mention this new phenomenon about e-galleries. Does everybody know 20 by 200 and Exhibition A? Yes? How many people have never heard of them? Write this down, because this is the new phenomenon, and get on their email lists. These are online galleries only. Everything is reasonably priced, and what I mean by reasonably priced, it's $20 to maybe $2,500, but mostly it's in that $100 to $500 range. They're signed, limited editions, and not only that, they come in different sizes. 20 by 200 is a phenomenal resource. They have well-known to emerging artists. It's curated. They have specialists. They have, I don't know if they call them curators, but they're the ones who choose the artists. There is a gallery for 20 by 200 on Spring Street. I think it's 6 Spring Street. But this is the way of the future. Not only are people buying, let me just, so, and this is interesting, Exhibition A shows you what it would look like in your bedroom or your living room. It's really quite a phenomenon. What's interesting too is that 20 by 200 now has framing services. So you don't have to leave, you know, your apartment. You can buy art and you can get it framed. Very, very smart. Okay, so first question. I'm going quickly because, as I said, I'm only on 39 and we have 104 slides. So first question pops up, can I get a discount? Right? Everybody wants a discount. So what is the kind of rule of thumb for a discount? Well, serious collectors and museum people expect between 10 and 20% off. Minimum 10% off. The issue oftentimes is, and I'm just going to jump to the last point, the secondary market. Has everybody heard that expression, the secondary market? Yes? How many people have never heard that before? Secondary market. So what that means, when you go into a gallery, they either own the work, that is the dealer, it's his collection basically, he's bought it, or he represents an artist. To have work consigned is that I want to sell a Mapplethorpe, and I give it to a dealer, and I say, look, I want $1,000. And that dealer, let's say, is selling it for $1,500. It's consigned. So the wiggle room for discount is very different. Most of the time, if it's consigned, there's less wiggle room. And if the dealer either owns the work outright or represents the artist, he's got a lot more, she's got a lot more wiggle room. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, you're stuck when you have it's consigned. So, but the range is 10 to 20% off. And of course, when you buy with a friend, you go into the gallery and you buy two, you have a better chance of a better discount. So, art fairs. So we did galleries, now art fairs. And well, I'll come back to discounts. So we have, as you know, as you probably know, two photo-only art fairs. One just happened in March, APAD, the Association of Independent Photography Art Dealers. How many of you went to that? How many of you have never heard of that before? Okay, how many of you that never have heard of APAD are photographers? No excuse. It's an art fair, and I brought the catalog with me for you to come up and take a look at. Here it is from 2012, last month. It's about 100 galleries that come in from all around the world. Mostly, I'd say there are a lot from the United States. It's the great place to study and look at photography. There are certain booths that may be, single artists like Irving Penn, or it may have a booth with lots of different artists, but it is a great schoolyard for learning about the sale in the fine art market, photography sales. The other is Paris Photo, which happens every November, and it's now at the Grand Palais, just moved, even bigger and better. So if you're looking for an excuse to go to Paris, tie it in to Paris Photo. It's fabulous, and the whole city comes out for it. All the museums do photography shows. There's all kinds of private, visits to not just to galleries outside of the show, but to private collections. It's a real happening. So, and it's parisphoto.com. Is it? So I would highly recommend looking into that. And then, of course, there's Art Basel Miami. There's the Armory show here, where there's photography, but it's not photography only. Auction houses, great resource, and also a great schoolyard for learning. The previews are free, and we actually have a lot of auction houses, many of which you probably don't know. The obvious ones are Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips. How many of you have heard of Swan? The great place. Great quality, good prices. Doyle just began a year or two ago doing photography sales. I'm one that likes to go through the bins because I love the chase, that excitement. I found 2 David Hockneys. Everybody know who David Hockney is?
Yeah.
I found 2 vintage David Hockneys, not signed, but he's in one of them, and the other one is a swimmer for $1,000 for both of them. So, you can still find great things at reasonable prices. Anyhow, go to these previews, they're free, and just roam through don't just look what's on the walls, but go through the bins too. You never know what you can find. Condition reports, especially for older work. This is really critical. Obviously, sometimes you see a rotten condition. So in these 2, these are Cartier-Bressons, and you can see the emulsion. I mean, they're old, but you can see the emulsion is off there. You can see the emulsion's off, and they've got this fold, a crimp. So the 2 words that are always used are a ding and a crimp. A crack in the emulsion, and a crimp is when it's folded over. But it's very important to get a condition report whenever you're buying something, whether it's a gallery, an auction, an e-auction, there's iGavel, e-auction, e-gallery, art fair, always ask for a condition report. And what this says, I don't know if you can see it in the back, but this is actually, I went to Phillips and asked for a whole bunch of condition reports for different images, and you can see they wrote back. I tried to put it in red: minor spot of retouching, bumped corners, minor edge chipping, and then they try to cover themselves by saying it doesn't affect the image. Same thing, hairline cracks, surface scratches, retouching. And what's important about a condition report is this. I know that I have work that has problems on it. Maybe it has some retouching, or maybe there's a surface scratch. But if it's from 1940s or 50s or 70s, I'm willing, it doesn't bother me, because I say, well, that comes with the territory of loving older work. The key to a condition report is honesty, it's transparency. They have to tell you what you're buying and the condition. So this is something really important to ask for if you're ever looking at especially older work. And it's sunlit, and that's not the right word. What's the word when the color begins to change? Like, Stephen Shore's work, for example. It's not deteriorating, it's sunstruck. That's what it's called, sunstruck. That also, they have to say that to you. Sometimes it's pretty obvious when you look at something, because the color and the stability of the paper in certainly the 70s and the David Hockney color, but even people like Laurie Simmons, her work, that paper began to turn purple. So, and it's not that you can buy a purple Laurie Simmons, it's fine. Just know, in the spirit of honesty and transparency, you need to know what you're getting and what the original condition was and is. So now I have a trick question. What's the difference? What's better, to buy at auction house or to buy at a gallery? Anybody? It's a trick question, by the way.
Whichever's cheapest.
I'm sorry?
Whichever's cheapest.
That's a good one. I'd buy that. Yep. Neither?
Because it's all individual.
But which is better? Neither. Okay. Huh? Auction. How many people, raise your hand, think auction is better? How many people think gallery is better?
Depends on what you want.
So the answer to the question is neither, or all of it. It's you have to do your homework. There's no way, you can say one is better than the other without a condition report, without knowing how's that price. If that artist has a gallery, how is that price compare? Because the auction houses do estimates. Is it stamped? Is it signed? Is it editioned? And the reason I have this Bill Klein up here, how many of you know who Bill Klein is? William Klein. Photographer, in his 80s right now, lives in Paris. I think he's one of the great photographers and very underpriced in this country. So he had this piece up for sale about 5 years ago, and it was on the cover of Christie's. And it sold for $40,000. The gallery was selling it at the time for $3,500. Howard Greenberg, $3,500. And I don't know if you can read this, but it's a 70s print. It was unlimited. Unlimited. But because it was the cover of the catalog, somebody assumed that it's worth more. Perfect example of somebody not doing their homework. Right? Think of what $40,000, or the difference between $40,000 and $3,500 could buy. How many images, you know? So, do your homework is the key. I want to talk a little bit about nonprofits. Does everybody know what a nonprofit is? Right? Anybody not know the nonprofit? .org, nonprofit. That's a good hint. And it museums and theaters and dance companies and public programs, and a lot of the nonprofits that deal in the photography world and in the visual arts world deal with more emerging artists, underrepresented artists. Nonprofits often have benefit auctions once a year, and some of them have limited edition print programs. And the proceeds from these two options go back to the nonprofit to keep the lights on. So for us, for collectors, it's a phenomenal resource. You still have to do your homework. You still have to look at the prices. You still have to get a condition report. But the prices of nonprofit auctions and certainly limited edition prints are usually 30 to 40% below retail. Great, great, great resource that many people don't realize exists. Also, commission in a regular auction, Phillips and Christie's and Sotheby's, they charge 25% above the hammer price. How many of you realize that? Did you know that? How many of you didn't realize that? Exactly. So you got to read the fine print. In a benefit auction, you could have an auctioneer from Christie's. And they're very generous. All of the auction houses are very generous with their time. So you can have an auctioneer from Christie's or Sotheby's. There's zero commission when you have a benefit auction. So these are great, great resources. And it's also an area where, and I'm going to get back to this at the end about getting on a collector's radar screen, it's a great area for you to get to know who has these benefit auctions, because they oftentimes are looking for work. So it's a great marketing tool for you to get your name out there and to get your work out there. These are the nonprofits that have benefit auctions in the fall, and I actually brought a lot of these. George Eastman House, is that up there? Yep, George Eastman House. This is the Center for Photography at Woodstock, Friends Without a Border, and the quality work is unbelievable. Camera Club in particular is always looking for artists to donate work, and so is Friends Without a Border. And I have the catalogs up here to show you the quality. The quality is great. In the spring, their BAM oftentimes has a benefit auction. Public Art Fund, these are not photo only. And then white columns. I actually, many years ago, bought a Cindy Sherman for $500 at a white columns benefit. So it's worth getting on the mailing lists of these nonprofits and previewing their benefit auctions. It's really a great resource. Even when you buy work at a benefit auction, you need to get a condition report. So here's a Lisette Model I bought. Howard Greenberg, I saw it in the gallery. He donated it to the Center for Photography at Woodstock. So I actually bought it for 50%, less than 50% of what he was selling it for in the gallery. So I pay attention not just to the work. I look and see who's donating it. So here's a piece I saw in the gallery. I'm going to say, write down your question so that you don't forget it until the end. But as I was just saying, condition reports, I also got a condition report on that Lisette model. And I know it's got problems. So it tells me even where there's a crease, indentations, abrasion, it tells me. But I know it was taken in the 40s, it was printed in the 70s, and I'm willing, I would love the image, and I'm willing to say that comes with, as I say, the territory, because it's a 70s print. And this is a perfect example of, it was made about 1946, printed later in the 70s. If it was 1946, it would be vintage, and if it hadn't been printed later. So, am I speaking too fast?
No.
Okay, I know I'm like rifling through this. The other option with nonprofits is a limited edition print program. And this is work oftentimes donated by a living artist, limited edition. This is not an open edition. It's a very common fundraising technique, and usually the work goes somewhere between $750 and $1,200. It's reasonably priced. And we're talking about, these are 3 of mine that I bought that were done. Abe Morrell I bought on the left. It was part of Lincoln Center, a limited edition print program they had. And Alex Soth I bought from Acrea, which they also do. How many of you have ever heard of Acrea? Write this down, acria.org. Phenomenal program. They have limited edition prints by incredible artists, not just photographers. And on the right-hand side is an Ed Bertinsky from Blind Spot. So, and these are the organizations that oftentimes have limited edition print programs. So Blind Spot, Acrea, Aperture, I'm sure all of you have heard of Aperture, and the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College in Chicago. That's another one that's great, has a great program. So, everybody all right? Pacing, everything? Okay. So I thought I would talk a little bit now about markings. And markings, particularly for older work, tell you about the history of that photograph. So it could be, how old is it? Is it signed? Is it stamped? Is it editioned? And this is an important part of collecting, which are the questions that we all ask, because we want to know perhaps who owned it, was it ever lent to a museum, how many exist, that's the editioning part. So I'm going to start with if something's stamped. And I went to a gallery that deals with Cartier-Bresson, and I said, I'm just going to do a study of Cartier-Bresson. So this is the back of Cartier-Bresson's work. And the little pictures are the front. But it's interesting. So this piece right here, for example, tells me that this photograph was in a photography show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1959. I think that's pretty cool. This says, please credit Cartier-Bresson, and this was probably used in a magazine. Is the image signed? And I think I'm going to get to, I don't remember if I included it here or not, but is it signed on the front or signed on the back? And by the way, signing on the back is a more contemporary phenomenon that artists used to really sign on the front. So here's Cartier-Bresson. 3 different signatures, and I'm going to even get more detailed on this. So tell me the difference. Can anybody tell me the difference between these 2 works of art? This happens to be mine, and this was in a gallery.
Missing a person.
I'm sorry?
You're missing a lot of the photos.
Oh, right. Besides that. Tell me, how about this? A little hint. I'll zoom in. Tell me about the signature.
Print versus mount.
No, I want to know let's focus in on the signatures. Sometimes help us tell an age. So what's the difference? Somebody describe the one on the left versus the one on the right. Right? So the one on the left is mine. And Cartier-Bresson died about, I want to say 1999 or so. So this is probably a 90s print. And this is probably a 70s, maybe an 80s print, but probably a 70s print. And he's an artist, didn't edition, didn't date. You know, sometimes on the back, if it's stamped, it gives you the history. And it turns out mine is going to be more valuable because it's older than this one, even though they're the same image, the one on the right side. Interesting. I know, you're going to have a lot of questions. It's good. So I want to spend a couple minutes now on editions. That's much more of a contemporary phenomenon. Sort of started in the 80s. And it's certainly, how many of you edition your work? How many of you do not edition your work? How many of you have never really thought about it? You just take your pictures, right? It's much more a commercial aspect, so that for those of you that edition your work, raise your hand again. How many of you have shown in a gallery, and that's why you've editioned it? Exactly. So the line, I think, when you start editioning is really when you want to go from fine art, your own fine art photography, to actually being commercial, and, you know, and selling it. And collectors pay attention to editions. How many? There are often two sizes. A smaller and a larger. There used to be like 3 sizes. Now it's down to, maybe even 4. Now it's down to 2. The smaller the size, the larger the edition, which means usually 10 to 15, maybe 25 maximum, but it's oftentimes less. The larger the image, the less there are of them. And that's usually 4 or 5. Making sense? And in addition to that, there are artist proofs. I don't think I brought a slide on that. So artist proofs are, there's usually minimum of 2, usually 4. The artist gets to keep them. And by the way, editioning usually happens with a gallery. You usually kind of talk to the gallery about how many I should make, and that goes with pricing too. But the artist proof is really, you own it, and you keep it. But it's edition in the sense of it's AP 1, 2, 3, and 4. I know an artist, how many of you have heard of Andrew Moore? He shows with Yancey Richardson, yes. And a friend of mine fell in love with this one image he did from a Russian series, and they were sold out. And then it turned out that Andrew and his wife were having a baby and he needed money. So he decided to sell that image, and my friend who lives in Paris, my friend found out about it, you know. But he, the artist, had the right to sell it through the gallery, but he holds on to it, so the gallery can't automatically sell it. It's an interesting phenomenon.
Could you just clarify on the additions? Does there need to be an addition total as well as the number, or can it just be the number?
No, it has to be a total. So an edition is number 2 out of 10. You can't, well, there are things called unlimited edition. That Bill Klein I showed you that sold for $40,000 was an unlimited edition, because Bill Klein doesn't edition except large formats. So you have to make the choice. It's either unlimited, but then I wouldn't even number it. But numbering means there's a finite number of them. So if I'm buying it, I know that it's number 2 out of 10. I want to just, in the process of editioning, how many of you saw the Vivian Mayer show at both Howard Greenberg and Steve Kasher, right? That's a phenomenon, right? Total phenomenon, sold like hotcakes, mostly posthumous. Well, here's an example. This is the Vivian Mayer show from the Howard Greenberg Gallery. And what's interesting about this is, so there were 15 made of each of these images. But as you close out, or as you move up in the edition, so numbers 1 through 5, $1,800, all the way up to the last two are worth $5,000. As you begin to close out an edition, and this happens across the board, it's more expensive. So that is part of the fine art marketplace. This, as I say, this sold like hotcakes. This is the back of an image. This is the back of the image of Bill Klein. And what this tells us is that the title, he made it in 1954. The print, he printed it in 2009. He only editions large format. So this tells me that it's number 2 out of 30. So he made 30 large formats. And he said there's only 2 made prior to 2006. And he signs it. So, price. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about price. The fear factor. Okay, so I'm showing you to start $1 million photograph. This photograph is probably smaller than this footprint right here. It is 4 1/4 by 3 inches. $1 million. Actually, I think it's down to $950 right now. You can see it at the Howard Greenberg Gallery. And what's interesting is, back to provenance and what I was saying about markings. So it shows us that it was in a gallery. I think this is Japan. It was in a show. This is a Kertész, I should have said. It's André Kertész. It is Chez Mondrian, 1926, vintage. Signed and titled in pencil on the print on the front. It was in a show at the Whitney in, I'm looking to see up the date, 1987. It was so it was lent from a private collection to the Cezanne Museum, and I believe that's Tokyo, in 1990. But it's interesting, you begin to see the provenance. And this is a very expensive photograph. So pricing, it's like the constellation, you know, the stars and the moon, and it's like this ever-changing constellation. So it's the marketplace, the edition. As I was saying earlier, you know, the higher you go, if it's editioned, but the higher you go in the edition, the more expensive it is. The condition, the rareness, the age, is it signed or are there other markings? Interestingly enough, reputation, not just of the artist, but of the gallery. So there are galleries where, and not just in New York, where it means something that it comes from that gallery, or it's like the gold star of approval, or maybe it's Gagosian. That piece I traded in one of the early slides from the busy Ed Bertinsky to the Lisette Model Bather. That piece was in a man named Harry Lunn. I don't know how many of you know his name, but Harry Lunn was one of the early photography dealers and lived in New York, Washington, and Paris. And I thought it was just particularly nice that that piece came from his collection. Whether it added to the value, I don't know, but it added to my personal value, you know, enjoyment of it. But a lot of times prices might go up because it is Gagosian gallery and you could find it cheaper somewhere else. There is no formula to any of this. As I said, all the factors are constantly changing. It's not a regulated market. There is no science to it. It's very risky if you're doing this for investment purposes. I go back to my threshold principle. However, some financial advisors say, put 15% in art. Put some money in gold, put some money in real estate, put some money in art, and diversify. If you look at Cindy Sherman right now, way back, even 5 years ago, I mean, there's like Cindy Sherman fever right now, and the prices are phenomenal. And it's because probably of the show at the Museum of Modern Art. How many of you have seen that show? So, Price After Death, interesting. How many of you have heard of Gordon Parks? So this is probably his most famous image of Muhammad Ali. It's not editioned. Gordon died in 2006. The price was $3,000, and it's $12,000 today. And it's not editioned. It's just, you know, the estate runs it off. So, through the gallery. A little bit about housekeeping. Record keeping is super important when you start having a collection. Framing, thinking about framing, thinking about storage if you're going to store it. Installation, like my railings, how important it is to me. I just don't like nails. And insurance and appraisals. And if we were spending more time together, I would get into this in far greater detail. But I am going to say a couple words about record keeping and framing. I will say, just jumping to installation for one sec, if you need somebody to install because you have a big piece, get a reference. Really important. Get a reference. Last thing you want is for somebody to damage not just damage the walls, but damage that piece. I keep two kinds of records. I keep paper files. So when there's a review that comes out, or an artist dies, I put the obit in my alphabetical paper files. I also keep a whole catalog, and I didn't bring it with me, but I keep a catalog on my desktop. And it includes when the image was made, when it was printed, the size, the signature indications, the provenance, if it's published. And then I put down the cost of the image, the original cost to me of the image, the frame, and the current value. And I'm way, way, way behind on replacement value right now. But that's sort of the basics. And I pulled out just one sheet. So this is the Cartier-Bresson of Matisse. And it tells me I bought it at Christie's in 1992. And the frame cost me $100. That it cost me, where is it? It cost originally, oh no, isn't that interesting? I don't know why it says frame cost, but it was framed. $2,100 is what it cost me. Plus, do you see it says $210 for commission? The commission back then was 10% at Christie's. Then what happens, and I'm way behind, current value says $4,500. Well, when I go to these art fairs or I go to an auction and I see that Throckmorton and Halstead Gallery at APAD 2 years ago were selling the same image for about $12,000, I type it up and I put it in my file because it's not an appraisal, but it gives me a sense of probably what it's worth. Framing, just a couple of sentences, actually 3 words on framing. Get a receipt. My framer lost this. Lost, quotes. I gave my framer this image and 2 other images, and I had used her for years and years and years. Never dawned on me to get a receipt. Gave her 3 images, 2 came back, and my Cartier-Bresson didn't. So yeah, and then by the time I thought, let me just deal with insurance, or it was too late. I think the statute of limitations had run out. But this is a valuable thing to lose, right? So what I want to do now is to sort of jump in and talk a little bit about getting on a collector's radar screen and what you can do. So we, all of us, are in a tiny community. Here I've been collecting for 27 years, I started as an intern at the International Center of Photography. When I was at Chase, I gave them money, sponsored exhibitions. Now I'm teaching classes there. You know, I've been involved with ICP since pretty much the beginning. You see the same dealers, collectors, teachers, auction specialists, photographers. We don't leave the field. We may change jobs, but we don't leave the field. And I'm a firm believer in what goes around comes around. It's a small community. I have some dealer friends who, each two of them that I can think of, Tom Gitterman and Parker Stevenson, each were directors at the Howard Greenberg Gallery before they started their own gallery. So you know, we're all working together. And that's exactly what David said to me when I talked about coming in today was, you know, we're in the same community. So even though I may be not talking about technical things today, it's still about helping the field in one way or another. I tried to boil down and give you 4 tips that I think help you get on a collector's radar screen. And so surrounding yourself with people that you trust, know what's going on, get out into the marketplace. Is there anybody in this room that's not a photographer? Raise your hand. Okay, you're all photographers. Who does not know what ICP is? Raise your hand. Who has never been? One person. Okay. Who has never been to ICP? Raise your hand. One person, 2 persons. And I say shame on you. Like, what is it, Channel 4? Shame on you, that guy Arnold Diaz. You know, it's the only photography museum in New York, and you're a photographer. You should get your butt out and go see what's happening at ICP. I mean, you need to be out into the marketplace. You need to try to figure out ways to get your work out there. And you need to create a relationship. Those are my 4 tips. So I'm going to go through each one of them. Surround yourself with people you trust is really critical. It could be a dealer, it could be another photographer, it could be a collector, it could be an auction specialist. It could be a teacher, it could be a trustee at a museum. When I started out, I keep talking about Howard Greenberg, but I really think he's been just like a professor to me. I would go to these auction previews and I'd be looking at things and he'd go, it's got a crimp or a ding or a, you know, he would help me look. I trust him. I don't necessarily buy, his taste isn't always my taste, but he's the first person I would send anybody to. And when I do my collecting classes, we'll always make a visit to his gallery. But so relationships, like we all have in every other aspect of our life, relationships are key. So that's my first tip. My second tip is, as I say, get yourself out into the marketplace. It means museums, art fairs, auction houses, galleries. And don't forget that the gallery openings are free. The auction previews are free. There's no excuse in the world why you shouldn't be doing this. So in a museum, you go see a photography show, you buy the catalog, you go to a lecture. You know, ICP has amazing photography lecturers, as does the Camera Club of New York. Great. Camera Club skews more the emerging photographers, and ICP a little bit more the established photographers. You go to an art fair. You buy the catalog. You take notes. Whose style is like your style? Way back to the early slides. You begin to see taste or the brand and where you might see yourself fitting in. Don't be shy to introduce yourself to a dealer. You'll see this in the next couple slides. I said say hello or even talk to a collector. It's pretty obvious. If you're a photographer, you're going to have a camera slung over you probably, or you're going to be doing like what you're doing here. But you begin, you know, collectors, you'll see them, they're taking notes. It's really easy to strike up a conversation. And you begin to see the same people all over the place. As I mentioned, the auction previews are free. It's a terrific schoolyard. You get a sense of prices. You can meet the specialists, and again, you're going to probably say hello to the same person that you saw, same collector, that you saw at a gallery opening the night before. You go to the galleries, get on their mailing lists, go to the openings, and again, introduce yourself or meet the dealers or say, I stopped by your booth at APAD or whatever it may be. But it's a small community, and I really think that everybody's trying to help each other. I mentioned Photograph Magazine. It's really terrific. Other resources are the Photograph Collector and Photo District News. Getting your work out there. So I mentioned that these benefit auctions are great resources for collectors. Limited edition prints, probably harder for you to get into because I think the vetting process is pretty strict. But nonprofits are looking for work. And I think in particular, I mentioned Camera Club. I don't think I brought that, but I did bring a lot of the other benefit auction catalogs for you to see the quality, but also the range of emerging to well-established. And I think that's a great way to get your name out there. Friends Without a Border. Has anybody heard of Friends Without a Border? You can write to info@fwab.org. You can ask for a Kiko, A-K-I-K-O. This is, I'm involved with this, and this is a benefit auction that was started, actually it's a hospital for children in Cambodia. And it was founded by a photographer, Japanese photographer named Kenro Izu. And he started about 10, 15 years ago doing these annual benefit auction, which raised at the time 50% of the money needed to run this hospital. So the hospital for children in Cambodia. Cambodia is one of the countries that really has one of the worst medical, not facilities, but to help with systems, and certainly for children. So, but they just started a new benefit auction. They're going to skew one for more established artists, and then they're always looking for work. I think it's called Bid for Friends, but they do a lesser, they skew, to more emerging artists that they look for, and it's just a terrific organization, a terrific cause. Nonprofit limited editions, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes donated by living artists, limited edition. This is a little bit more difficult I think the vetting system is a little bit more difficult, but if you go online and you look at a Korea and Columbia, the museum in Chicago, it's called Museum of Contemporary Photography, Blind Spot and Aperture, do some research. Blind Spot, Aperture, and Korea are all based here. Do some research, see who they have. Maybe there is a way that you might be able to get involved. And the fourth tip, which I think is probably the most important, is creating a relationship. We collectors can help, but if you think it's about buying, it's a one-shot deal. I mean, sales is short terms. It's a one trick. It's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, but you want your work purchased. But at the same time, to me, a relationship is about a longer-term commitment, partnership, relationship between an artist and a collector. And a collector as, I said cheerleader, but as a friend, as an advocate, as a cheerleader, as a confidant, and somebody who can help open doors. And I don't want all your business cards at the end of this. But here are two examples. I have two artists. They both happen to be French. Martine Fougeron lives here in New York. She was just anybody read the New York Times Magazine on Robert Caro? She did the big photograph of him, and she does a lot of photographs for the New Yorker. Has a gallery in Paris, a gallery in Philadelphia, doesn't have a gallery here. And Rafael de la Puerta, who won the Young Photographers Award at ICP in 2010, who lives in France. So I just want to give you two examples of relationships that I have built with these photographers. With Martine, I met her, I went to a camera club lecture, and I happened to be sitting next to her at dinner afterwards, and we started talking. I don't own her work, but I champion her work. I've given her advice on a New York City gallery. I've been the ghostwriter behind the scenes. I'm a good writer for when she's applied for grants. I invite her when I do my collectors groups and we invite artists. I invite her to come. And she's really become a good friend, and I feel like I've become a good cheerleader for her. Nothing to do with sales.
Would you buy her work?
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't fit into a little bit into my own taste. You know, and I have a big problem because if I buy her work, she's a friend, then I have to buy somebody else's work who she's good friends with that I'm good friends with, right? So it's really hard. So it's easier to say no and to help in all these other ways. In the case of Raphael, I do own his work. I don't know if anybody's familiar, he did a set of 30-something landmines done to look like little gems. They're about this big and black. You can see them black boxes, and I own that pineapple, and I own this is from the United States. It's a bomb landmine, and this is a landmine from France. My commitment to France still. I met him through a sort of a confluence of different ways, through his New York City dealers, Parker Stevenson, word of mouth. He was at a dinner I was at in Paris, and also I heard about him through an ICP walkthrough at APAD. The same thing, I champion his work. When I have collecting classes, I oftentimes bring them to his gallery. After he won the ICP award, I did a dinner. His parents were in town, and I did a dinner, and the criteria for coming to my dinner was you had to speak French because his parents didn't speak any English. But it's just, these are relationships, and they're so important. Final thoughts for you. How many of you have a business card? Raise your hand. How many of you do not have a business card? Of those with a business card, how many of you have a business card with an image on it? Excellent. I think it's a really good idea to have a business card with an image, a website if you can do it, and an artist statement if somebody wants it. An artist statement, I didn't have one that I wanted to bring, but I did bring a book, if you're interested, of fact sheets. So this no different, you can see this no different than what I do with nonprofits, is where you need to, most people in the arts are rotten writers. Its is always spelled wrong, I-T-S or I-T''S. Your is always spelled wrong. Between you and I, it should be you and me. It's a preposition. And it's really important, if you're interested in applying for a grant, for example, having given away so much money, I know what it's like to receive written material. It's really important to learn how to write. And it's hard. It's not easy at all. And as you'll see from these 1-2 pagers, so you need short, simple sentences. Another pet peeve is when the first sentence is the first paragraph. 2 pages, images, you have to have images. And you don't want to make the reader work too hard. You don't want to make it really dense. You want to categorize so they know. I'm working with somebody right now on a project, and she's applying, she got a NIFA grant, I guess, and she wants to reach out. And her material was just so dense. So I'm spending a couple of hours with her, and we're redoing her materials. But it's important that you learn, if you want to get funded for something, or you want to, whatever it is, maybe it's a show and you need a flyer, nobody is going to spend more than 60 seconds reading it. I'm sorry to say this. It's your sales document. Then they'll get to know you and they'll love the work. But you need to work on that 60-second sales document. You all took material without even knowing what it was when you first got up here, and I just want to say that I'm going to do a couple more lectures in May. There's 6 dates. I think we're just going to do May 22 here. You all took this, but you didn't realize, I'm sure. This is about collecting. And if you go to the other side of the page, it's $500 for the day. So it's expensive. But we're going to do the morning session here. It's going to be even more elaborate. And then we're going to go and visit galleries in Chelsea behind the scenes. And it's really about collecting. And we're going to do breakfast and lunch as well. But it's the entire day. And that's the email. And if you think of anybody that might be interested, we would appreciate it, because I'm doing this with a colleague, and I've not done this. I've done it for Camera Club, or I've done it for ICP, or I've done it for the Jewish Museum and others. But this is the first time we just thought we'd try it on our own and take people out all day. So we could use your help in spreading the word. The other is Camera Club, and this is going to be for photographers more. Inside the collector's mind, what a photographer needs to know. It's 4 sessions, Wednesdays in the evening. I think it's going to be sort of 6 to 9, 6:30, 9:30. It's going to be classroom. It's going to be a visit to a well-known private collector. We're going to go to a gallery in Chelsea, behind the scenes, just one, and talk with him about how he works with collectors building collections. And then the last class is at my home, and there's a pretty good assignment that the students have to fulfill. So it'll be a visit to my apartment, a visit to the collection, and a discussion about the assignment. So, and I think that's it. Okay, great. So why don't you stand up and say the question, and if I repeat the question, it's because they're recording this, and I want to make sure that everybody hears the question and it also gets taped. So, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. One of the suggestions you made in the part about how to get on a collector's radar screen was to get your work out there. As well, photographers, I think that's probably the core question is, how do we in fact get our work out there, given the high restrictions in the market? I was curious especially about how you feel website development works in terms of getting the work out there. I know years ago we could go to a gallery, and or sometimes they have to have a day for viewing, but they don't do that anymore. So how does one in fact get one's work out there? It's sort of like, you have to be in a show in order to get attention. How do you get the attention to be put into a show?
Right. So the question is, how do you get your work out there? And I think there's no simple answer for it, and the market is flooded with photographers. That's why I think that a good way to start is understanding what your work is about and the galleries that might relate to your work, especially those early ones that I mentioned that are in the emerging category. I think that the places like Camera Club, they do shows all the time. If you go on their website, in fact, Elizabeth Biondi, who used to be the picture editor at the New Yorker, and Martine Fougeron, it's a juried exhibition. They look for submissions, but I think you can't be in a cocoon. That's why one of my thoughts was, to get out into the marketplace. I don't have an easy answer, but I think that you just have to know what's going on. And I think it starts to sort of bubble up. It has to start someplace. So I think the galleries that are focusing on emerging artists and getting to know the dealers, I'm not a specialist, I'm not a dealer, I'm a collector. But in terms of I think nonprofits are a great resource as well. Websites, I think, are good things to do. I would go to Jeffrey Touton, I think is his name. He runs the gallery for 20 by 200. They have more emerging artists than anybody I have ever seen in my life. So that's the E-Gallery, but they actually have a real space gallery on Spring Street. I think you just have to get yourself out there. There's no easy answer. Yes.
I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about digital as opposed to silver gelatin or prints made in a darkroom. Are you as a collector accepting pigment prints on an equal par with silver gelatin or darkroom prints? Where do you stand on that?
Okay, the question is digital versus gelatin silver prints, and sort of where do I stand on it and how do I feel about it. That little Wegman is an inkjet print that I showed you. I would say I'm a more traditionalist, probably. So I am a little bit more on the gelatin silver print side of things. And I'm not as good on the digital side of things. So I'm not a great person to ask about this. But I think, did you want to answer the question? Oh. So, sorry. But I think that, you know, it's hard to answer that. I've seen some things that I think are absolutely beautiful. And I have a hard time telling what's digital, you know, sometimes in inkjet and all the
less collectible.
less collectible. You know something? If something is editioned, I go back to that. I want to know there's a limited quantity. So that little Wegman, I think, I'm trying to think, it was a large, maybe it was 250 of them for $100. But I want to know its edition. So to me, that is the make or break more than anything else. Interesting, but that's my perspective.
An emerging artist, is that someone just starting or someone whose name is not known?
You know, the definition of emerging artist is all and any of the above. I don't think there's a definition. Emerging artists could be, I think, people that are not exposed as much. It has nothing to do with age.
Okay,
Right?
that's
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Is it confusing or a turnoff for dealers or collectors if you have more than one broad theme? Like I do a lot of floral landscape stuff, and I also do portraiture.
So the question is it a turnoff for dealers if you fall into different buckets? You know, you have different themes. And the answer is no, I don't think so at all. I think there are, you know, look at a Mapplethorpe or look at, I mean, it may, are you saying at the same time? Or are you?
Yes. I mean, like right now I'm doing a series of street flowers. I also
Right.
am doing a series of portraiture stuff.
Right.
They're major themes, and again, for like an unknown
Right.
emerging person rather than like Mapplethorpe is very.
Well, Mapplethorpe, when I bought Mapplethorpe and Serrano and all that, it was in the 80s and they weren't so well known. So I think, no, I think it's fine. I think that the thing is, if you want to go for a dealer, then you sort of have to decide what dealer do you want to talk about, because somebody that's interested in flowers may not be interested in street. So I think that's okay. Yep.
As a collector, would you buy a photograph of someone that was completely unknown? If you saw something that you totally loved, does that happen?
Absolutely, it happens. The question is, as a collector, would I or somebody else buy a piece that's by an artist who's completely unknown? And the answer is, of course. It's all about gut. And again, it's about the threshold. I'm willing to do that, but if it's going to be so expensive, that's one reason I have a harder time with contemporary art. Contemporary art to me, color contemporary art, is very expensive when I think that you could buy a Steichen from 1901-3 for $2,500 or $2,000 from camera work, a gravure, when somebody I've never heard of is charging $10,000. So I have a very hard time. That's me, but I have a hard time with that. So, but absolutely to buy something, and again, everybody has their threshold. Yes, and back.
One of the problems that we occasionally run into is when you're looking to present your work as fine art to collectors, to galleries, especially in some form of for sale, what resource do you look into pricing your work comparatively, and so forth?
Well, first of all, again, back to the artist statement, or how you consolidate who you are, super important. Pricing oftentimes is done in conjunction with a dealer. If you don't have a dealer, then it becomes more of a challenge. And I think what you have to do is make yourself reasonable, however you define reasonable. So, and what you can afford, basically. You know, I know artists who spend so much money because they have to print and then they have to frame it, and you know, it's for a show, or they have to ship it somewhere. So I think it's the $64,000 question, no pun intended, but what? Oh, so, but I think that pricing is connected to editioning, and I think a lot of times too, students, because when I teach at SVA, they trade with each other too. You know, and they sort of say, okay, well, I think this is about this X value. You know, just don't go too low. So yeah.
This is a question about editioning as well. I'm at a point where I'm in group shows, and I've sold prints in group shows, but I've been stymied as to if I should make editions or not, because I'm not getting that much money for them at this point, you know. I just don't know, should I keep myself more open and save these prints maybe someday for gallery where I could charge more, or it doesn't work that way? You know,
so the question, I think, is editioning and whether it's worth it to do it for these group shows, or should I save my better work that I want to edition and not give away the store right now, sort of, right? Yeah. I would probably, I don't know what kind of group shows these are, but if they're
like some auction ones that you mentioned.
Uh-huh.
You know, group auction.
Group auctions.
Non-profit.
All right, so group nonprofit auctions. You know, I think it's case by case and where you are in your career. I mean, I have a friend who was an artist, and she's now recognized. And I remember buying a piece, unlimited edition. It wasn't a photograph. It was $50. And then I bought a silk screen. And I don't think it was editioned. And in fact, I think it's unique. And it was expensive for me. It was $600 at the time, and now that piece, believe it or not, is insured for $30,000. I can't believe, you know. I think when you're starting out, when she was starting out, you want your work out there, right? You just want your work out there. And if you feel that your work would do better if it's editioned, I don't know. I think these benefit auctions are great, and I think that we as collectors don't necessarily feel that you have to edition for benefit auctions. If I buy it at Christie's or Sotheby's, you know, depending on the artist, Cartier-Bresson did an edition, but you know, I pay attention. Those are one of those markers that I pay attention to. So I think it's hard to say because I know you're trying to save yourself as well, but so.
Maybe I should not edition it.
I don't know if you should. I'm sort of leaning towards not editioning in the beginning.
Right. And then,
call it an artist proof.
Well, I just got 3 prints that were purchased by NIFA to give to advisors, and I didn't know what to do because I figured
if it's going to advisors, you mean art advisors?
I get advisors on their board.
Oh, advisors on their board.
Yeah.
You don't mean art advisors that would.
They might be.
No.
I don't know.
I don't know. I can talk to you about it later if you want. I don't know. Yes.
What about what's your preference in terms of signing prints?
Such a good question. What's my preference in terms of signing prints? I happen to be somebody who likes signatures on the front. I come from the museum world. I feel like it's part of that aesthetic. You know, it's part of the piece. Most artists sign on the back right now. For contemporary artists, they sign on the back. I have a great story. Does anybody know who Helen Levitt was? Right. So when I was at Chase, we did an exhibition that was organized by San Francisco MoMA, traveled across the United States of Helen Levitt's work, and I decided I wanted to buy a piece from her dealer in San Francisco, and I wanted to feel as if it was a little bit different, that it wasn't just cookie cutter. So she was an artist who signed on the back, and I asked if she could sign sign it on the front, sign her name on the front. So only because it made me feel like it was a little different. But I think most artists now sign on the back, and they use that label like Bill Klein did, that label sort of format.
Sign with date or without date? Your feelings about
On the
that?
back, sign with date.
Sign
Absolutely, sign with
if you're
date.
signing on the front, do you put a date on it?
No, I wouldn't like it because I think it detracts. However, I have a Robert Frank, and it's got a date on it, and it's, you know, I think it's part of that piece now. But I normally would say no, because then it starts getting cluttered. But I don't know. A label on the back would have it, could have it.
Like something that's stuck on the print?
On the back, that's what a lot of artists do. They do labels. They don't sign the print. They have labels. So go into a gallery. I mean, this would be a great, if we were doing class together, I'd say go into a gallery and go look at the back of prints. When I teach at, not this class at Camera Club, but oftentimes there's an assignment between the two classes, because I usually will do probably 30 more slides than this and spend more time. And the assignment is find something you hypothetically want to buy, come in and tell us about it. But most important, I want you to come in and tell me how you were treated by the dealer. Back to relationships. It's really important, right? So, yeah, in the back.
How would you present prints, or how are prints presented to you? Are they just on paper? Are they matted? Are they matted with an overlay mat? Is that purely artist's choice, or what's the...
How are potential prints presented to me? If you go to Bill Hunt's lecture on Thursday, he would be his collection is 1,200 pieces. He's gigantic. I think that most of the time they're either, I think they're called not printer's proofs, but you know, handling proofs is what they're called. So that you, if you don't want to mat them and go to that expense, you do a set that is, you know, that are going to get squished, basically, or marked with fingers. And it's called handling proofs. And a lot of the galleries have them, they keep them in a box. So I think that's, you know, I think it's expensive to mat, basically, so, yeah. Yes?
About the signature, pencil, pen, doesn't matter, is there a preference?
Absolutely your preference. So the question is signatures, pencil or pen, your preference. So, yeah.
I come from an art background, and I thought that when you have an edition, you know, if it's a lithograph or something, the first prints are more valuable than the last, but it's the reverse?
It's the reverse, right. In a lithograph, for example, like, you know, a Bonnard, Vuillard, or first state, second state. In photography, it's absolutely, as you begin to go up and you run, you know, in the edition, that second Raphael de la Puerta I bought of the Landmine, France, I think I got number 3 of, I forget what, 10, called 10. And it's not the cheapest, it's the next cheapest up, you know, and it's divided into quadrants, I guess, by the dealer. So.
For resale too, or just the first
Resale is a whole nother, no. Resale, the edition issue has no bearing on price. It's crazy. It's only it's only when you're selling into the first marketplace. Well, it's, you know, it's like when you think about it, think about Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg, who's, you know, now has died, but, you know, these artists whose prices are astronomical, they don't get a penny when it's sold at auction. So, yeah.
To continue the series, do you do the printing of your series all at once? Because
You mean
of the printer or the time period, or?
I know, and I wish Alan Frame is a friend and an artist, photographer.
I have 2 questions.
And he's actually the chairman of the board of the Camera Club. And no, there's a lot of unfinished editions. And you know who's queen of the unfinished editions is Diane Arbus.
Yeah.
You know, her daughter, June, wants to control the marketplace. And it's supposed to be an edition of 75, and they haven't done 75. So I would say no, and I think a lot of artists they do the edition, they do on demand. So back to the editioning issue, you know, if you're doing 10, don't print 10 now. Look at Bill Klein, where it said the date of when they were printed. So you do it on, you know that it's going to be, let's say it's in a gallery, but you print one, and then that's number 1 of 10, and if it becomes an unrealized edition, it's an unrealized edition.
When I did my printing in the 70s, I was working on with Portrigo Rapid, and that paper is no longer in existence. So you know,
right.
There's things that if you do it then, those things change. You know, and my other question was, for the history, when you do it on the back of the, who does it? You know, does it the gallery, or does,
What-
do you, when you're sending it out, what, do you stamp it, you know, or do you put a paper, if it's archival, you know,
So the question is history and the provenance and who stamps it. You know, I don't really think they do that as much as they used to do it. I've lent to museums twice, and I'm about to lend for the show opening up in May at ICP. And I don't think there's a stamp or anything that I lent an Ann Golden to the Whitney and a Serrano to the ICA in Philadelphia. I don't think those images are stamped.
so if you
I
do
don't-
stamp them, you, because you say that you own them, or?
No.
As
The
a
stamp would
collector?
be the museum. It's the stamp. That Cartège that we saw, the little $1 million piece, those were labels from where that image had been lent. So,
And as a photographer, would you put your stamp on it saying what paper it is, or
not
this,
at all.
that, nothing
No,
like that?
no. You could put the back. I'm sorry. When the question was the back of an image, if you lend it, or you know, what kind of stamping should I, as the photographer, do? Am I right?
Yeah.
To label it, and it's not you that's doing the stamping. Those were like that had the Cartier-Bresson had a stamp from the Metropolitan Museum on it, and the little Cartège $1 million piece had a stamp, had a label from the Whitney, and also a label from the Cezanne Museum in Japan.
But that picture, that image was the one that went out. But all the others, would they have, you know, kind of like similar, kind of like swing with that?
But that was an era. It's
shown?
also an era. But you know, Berenice Abbott. Everybody's heard of Berenice Abbott. Well, she has that Abbott Maine stamp on the back of hers. So I mean, you can make a stamp, but you know, a signature is usually enough. All right, we did it. So, all right, how'd I do? Okay, talk too fast.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.